Hello, everyone. Welcome to another panel. Today we are talking about anime, and because I've only watched about a quarter of what's available out there, I recruited these amazing people so they can talk about the other three quarters that I have not seen of anime, so we can have the whole spectrum of anime represented. Oh wait, I totally forgot to introduce myself again. So I am Dr. Elizabeth, and this is another panel for Psychology for Geeks. And today we have Carl. Do you want to introduce yourself real fast?
Absolutely. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another episode. My name is Karl Custer, licensed master social worker. I'm a clinician working out of New York City. My populations are generally older adults because I work for the nonprofit JASA, which is the Jewish Association for the Services for the Aging. But ever since 2007, I was a nationally touring anime-specific stand-up comedian and panel presenter, and my stage name was Uncle Yo. I had the honor of presenting, say, podcast interviews, game shows, talk shows, cosplay burlesque, cosplay pro wrestling, cosplay masquerades, and after about a decade or so doing programming that was all comedic fan driven, then going for my license and my master's in social work, I now do presentations at conventions that are much more mental health oriented, such as talks on poverty's effect on mental health, as I frame it as Batman versus Just Us, or the panel last year that I did at a few conventions, adolescent trauma recovery and Naruto. And it is a pleasure to be here today. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, thank you for saying yes. Jeremy, you want to go next?
Hey everyone, my name is Jeremy Fox. So I'm a licensed professional counselor in the state of Georgia. So I have been an anime fan since Toonami, that some of the earlier days there with Gundam Wing, Dragon Ball Z, even Big O for any of those niche anime fans out there. I specialize in EMDR therapy and trauma work. I throw some ego state work in there too. And I work with usually late teens up through entirety of adulthood. So I usually see adults as well, like Carl. And I have a real passion for doing somatic stuff with EMDR, have people move how they feel that they wish they could have during trauma, all of that kind of integrative stuff with a lot of visualization. So anime dovetails really nicely with that. So I'm glad to be here, and I look forward to the rousing conversation here.
Brent?
Yeah, I'm Brent Lyles. It's nice to meet everybody. I'm a licensed mental health clinician in the state of Florida. I specialize as well with an EMDR trained, polyvagal theory, some experiential type therapy. My populations is 18 to about 60 inpatient, outpatient treatment centers of substance use and mental health. I do groups, which is one of my specializations. I also have a private practice on the side as well. I do trainings throughout the week with my school, which I'm very pleasure and honor to always have at PBAU in downtown West Palm Beach. I do a lot of their training with polyvagal theory and some somatic stuff. I'm very happy to be having this geek conversation. I'm actually getting very excited about what conversation is going to happen. I've been a fan of anime and manga for about since the 90s, Pokemon, Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball Z, and then some more niche as the years came by. So pleasure on my end and very honored to be able to talk to you guys today.
Well, you guys are all so nice. I am going to start with the most controversial thing I can think of. So, what is anime? Because there's a lot of.
Oh, I thought you were about to ask the panel, like, which of us is the diversity hire, the left-handed guy or the Capricorn on the call?
No. We're talking about. Well, I didn't even ask if the dub or the sub version was better. So
That depends on the show, really.
Yeah, it depends on the director.
It really does. Yeah. But when it comes to anime, like, what is it that you see as anime? Because a lot of people are like, well, because one of my favorite things, and you can kind of see it, is Avatar: The Last Airbender, and it has some sort of like anime qualities or anime-esque qualities to it, but a lot of people just get very offended if I say it's anime. So what are your thoughts on that? On what constitutes as anime?
Do you mind if I start something from the very beginning and then Jeremy
ahead.
and Brent kind of piggyback and contradict as go on? So even though, say, colloquially, fans that are going to be closer to our generation, those born in like the 80s, you doing some of the research, one of the original fathers of the Japanese style of anime that we know today would probably be Osamu Tezuka, the creator of Astro Boy. However, it's really important to note that just the medium of sequential comic book art storytelling has really been a 60 to 70-year game of telephone that really expedited toward the end and occupation of Japan after World War II. For example, Osamu Tezuka would say years down the line that his inspiration to draw the giant eyes that became iconic for anime was actually inspired by America's Betty Boop. There was a lot of back and forth over the years.
Right.
So if you just want to be as milquetoast as possible, anime, just a Japaneseified shortened for animation. So textbook definition, it is an animated series, a cartoon that is starting in Japan. It gets over here through many variations. Sometimes a video game is so successful, it gets an animated series. A comic book or a manga is so successful, it gets an animated series. Sometimes even because Japan loves to personify and do mascots with different towns and cities, every city will have a major mascot. A popular enough mascot will have PSAs on that develop into short commercial length animes. And as you just mentioned, Elizabeth, with like Avatar: The Last Airbender, Kappa Mikey, the early 2000s Teen Titans series, you can absolutely pull that aesthetic and that appeal and just know flat out, we are American fans that are playing in the anime homage, the je ne sais quoi, we're playing in those aesthetics. So an anime is an animated series originating in Japan, gets over internationally through many different ways. Brent, Jeremy, any contradictions? Anything you want to add on to that?
Jeremy, go ahead. That's a good follow-up.
It is a good intro. I would say it becomes a philosophical question, like you said. At what point is it like an imitation of an imitation? If we take it and do something like Kappa Mikey or Avatar, which Avatar was really a labor of love, I could see why people would consider that anime. I mean, even if a Japanese studio is in America and makes an anime, is it not anime in that sense because it's on US soil? I'd argue no, it is anime. So I think what's difficult is when you're pedantic about it and wanting to stick to a strict definition, you have to have the specific points that are satisfied. So I was reading interesting Reddit definition of it, and it's like it needs to have some Japanese involvement on the team animating it, right? Even if it's some American studio, it needs to have that start in the individual show. So I lean toward that for like the most specific, if you would call milquetoast definition of anime. But if we want to adopt other examples like Avatar, which is kind of a genre breaker on that, you just have to go case by case then and say, are Big Eyes intrinsic to anime? Does that get shuttled to that category? Well, Powerpuff Girls isn't really anime. It's more pop stuff that, even though that was inspired by anime. So you've got like a recursive, you've got this sort of feeding in the cyclical. We talk about cycles so much as therapists. You've got like the Japanese influence, first American influence on Astro Boy, then Japanese anime influence on American cartoons. So I think it really depends on the individual show, like story structure. My gosh, the original Teen Titans was great. You could see so many arcs happening, so many different characters introduced.
The characters would have little chibi forms as well, like they shrink down to very simplified animation. That's chibi that we get from
it
Japan.
Is. And that's almost to me like a tribute to anime, that show, because it might not strictly be, but it's got enough flavor. It's like a remix of an American cartoon. What it could be without the anime, right, is one thing, but with it, it's kind of like a remixed American cartoon. So for me, stuff that was on Toonami, like Gundam Wing and Big O and things that have been translated strike as anime. But then with Big O, which is a really cool giant robot show where the main character is like Bruce Wayne from Batman, and it's noir, and it took off in America. It wasn't as popular in Japan, and guess what? Japan partnered with America to make season 2 of Big O. So at that point, is it not anime? No, of course it still is. So it's so difficult. Like even that example, like where do we draw the line? It's tough because it's almost like that definition, like you'll know it when you see it. So
Yes, you have to use your dialectical mind. Like, even though the Americans funded
right,
it and it went to the same studio, because by Jeremy, one of your earlier definitions, if a Japanese hand or studio was animating it, then you're
right,
also including Hanna-Barbera's Scooby-Doo.
right,
The entirety of Thundercats and Silverhawks
Mhm.
is a Japanese studio doing an
right.
American property.
Exactly. So, and yeah, and then people say, "Oh, Hanna-Barbera stuff's not anime." Why? Stylistic stuff. So stylistic and geographic together, if you want to be strict. But let the viewers decide, and our
Yeah.
listeners.
Yeah, I'm kind of similar to with Jeremy in this. I think it has to have some type of influence within style and storytelling. I love how culture can blend itself into other types of culture, and we're seeing that now with future African aspects right now, and just seeing this genres mix all together. So definitely, since I've been in the '90s and growing up, since I was born in '87, that influence, and then what kind of got into it with more within late 2010s, I started being like, oh no, actually that is not actually was what what I thought anime
Right.
or manga was going to be. And then I really did a deep dive into a lot of the shows, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's really the storytelling, it's the artwork,
Mhm.
it's the you see these themes that come up. And I've always kind of respected they can take anything and just twist it just a little bit, and it makes the story unique, kind of like what we see with My Hero Academia, right? Who would have thought that we could put a very interesting spin in the superhero genre, but they did.
Right.
I
Mhm.
actually, I hate to say this as a Marvel and DC fan, I actually prefer it a lot better. I like the storytelling. I like the very bizarre and oddities of the powers and the way they build
Mhm.
them.
Most excellent. And if you're a fan of My Hero Academia, I also got to recommend from the 2010s Tiger and Bunny, in which a giant, almost casino-esque Manhattan City. So it's a world where the superheroes are also on live TV, and they have sponsors to please on live television as they're also capturing bad guys. And so it's both Japanese idol worship as well as a comeback story from 10-Minute Tiger, who gets paired up in the first ever superhero team with a guy who has his exact power set. And so Tiger and Bunny, highly recommend. I think it's both Netflix and Hulu at the moment. But even to bring on what Brent was saying, the longer that you consume Japanese media, the more you start to learn that in one way we keep using the word aesthetic as if anime is like a genre, when in fact the way that Japan views storytelling, anime is just another medium of storytelling. So if someone
Right.
asks how many anime out there, your answer is yes. And how much television is there? How much movies is there? How much musics? Where is that music?
Well, I
Right.
mean, yeah, because now we have it's not because it has made like anime has made such a big impact in like other countries. I heard France, Mexico is huge uh population or like huge fans of Dragon Ball and like other things. So I'm like, okay, like you can't, it's not contained to Japan anymore, right? And now we have anime, like for example in Crunchyroll, we have Solo Leveling, but that was actually not came from a manga, right? So like, is that different? Like, does that not count as anime anymore? I mean, it was created, I think, by an American studio, Crunchyroll. So and now we have, I think, more recently, I think One Piece. Netflix is doing and the new animation of One Piece. So is One Piece no longer anime? Like it's so in my head, I'm like, it doesn't really matter, okay? It doesn't matter because
Right.
what is so awesome about whatever all the things that we call anime is that you have like these really cute anime for like girls, and they're like, you know, like really chibi characters or like very girly characters, and then you have like these overly powered characters that their power system makes no more sense anymore because they're like moving planets and whatnot, and then you
Right.
have like the slice of life, like you have everything for everyone.
Oh
I
yeah.
am not a horror fan, but I have heard a lot about Japanese anime horror, that it's
Yeah.
great, and I'm also no thank you, but you know, there's a little bit of everything for everyone. So
Correct,
Love
because when
explaining
it's a
about this.
medium, you're talking about, just like in therapy, every population has the story told totally differently. One
Right.
of my spouses and I favorite show was a 12 episode that got released on Amazon Prime about a gentleman in his early 30s who is just starting in a nonprofit to build a modern Japanese dictionary. It's not about the small office building a dictionary. Clearly, it's his first experience in trying to confess his love for a woman that lives in his apartment building, and the struggles of what it is to go from your 20s to 30s, of going from a kid to a professional. Like we talk, you want slice of life. It is right there. There's always something for everyone. And the most popular ones that get out there, we're going to mention Dragon Ball Z and One Piece and Naruto.
Mm.
And these are built in the same way that cartoons were in the States in the 80s. These are built to sell products. They're built to sell action figures, video game adaptations, summer movies that have nothing to do with the main story. And these larger than life slow power crawls and the tournament arcs and going to a new school, like you'll see on Shonen Jump. That's the important part of having the shonen versus the shoujo definition and genres of those. Jeremy and Brent, do you guys familiar with those terms? Do you want to just lay those
Yeah.
out for the listeners?
Go ahead, Jerry.
Well, I'll throw out shonen.
Accurate.
You're
That's
doing a
fine.
good job of piggybacking, so go ahead.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. So shonen is typically the more adventure focused. I would almost call it hero's journey manga or anime, where there's someone starts out, develops their power, and there's a progressive journey. Rivals can become friends and then take on more rivals. So things like Dragon Ball Z, shows like that. And shoujo, which I've not read or watched as much of, in my understanding, is more of the slice of life, typically more aimed at girls.
Yeah, because shonen
manga.
means young boy, and
Right.
shoujo means young girl. You'll hear it all
Exactly.
the time in
Right.
My Hero Academia is All Might referring to Bakugo shonen.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So there's something there for everyone, right? And just to finally put the nail in the coffin of what's anime, I'm thinking as we're talking here about studio involvement and who hands it off, like Netflix and the studio. Would you consider the Legend of Zelda Philips CDI game mainline, right? Like it was on a failed system. It's Zelda, but it was so butchered in its execution. And that's for listeners and viewers, it's the really meme-worthy snipped animations of Link that are really like in this bizarre style that go, I mean, you can clearly tell it's Legend of Zelda, it's Link, but there was something done to it and so obscured that it's like through a glass darkly. Like, is it Legend of Zelda? I mean, most people wouldn't want to claim it except ironically. So I think with manga and anime, kind of the execution and the finished product also plays a big role. And if people are going to be willing to accept it and it survive the gatekeeping process to become anime.
Yeah, I'm a little bit similar to Elizabeth with this. I'm very open-minded when it comes to some of the definitions, interpretations. I've always seen it, and hopefully this is not offensive, always seen the difference between it's the hero's journey versus kind of like sitcom, right? So it's kind of like what your T is, right? Do you want the daily living of like days of our lives, or do I want the hero's journey that has kind of like these twists and turns that we don't see in a lot of American style shows, which funny enough, they're actually adopting, which shows a lot of influence within storytelling. I mean, I thought I was a huge fan within certain shows and comics growing up. And then when I got into manga and anime, I was like, storytelling is completely different. And not only that, but the hero journey with it is, I don't even know if we can even classify as Joseph Campbell's version of it. It's like its own unique style of where it can go, where it can lead to. So that's how I've always interpreted the two.
It's so important too, is because our generation, we would grow up with having it before or after school or Saturday mornings, just serialized shows. Now, the really important parts about the early 90s breakthrough gateway shows for our generation, and that's that season and a half dub of Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon, was there was sequential consequence and story and development, whereas everything else we grew up with, Saturday morning cartoons, are very episodic. Maybe there's something big that happens at the end of the season, but for the most part, it's not. hour by hour, step by step playthrough. Not only that, but combined with the consequence. If you watch Tom and Jerry and Tom drops an anvil on Jerry or the other way around, 30 seconds later, they're up and back. There's no consequence.
Right.
But our generation, when we see Piccolo sacrifice himself for Gohan, and we've spent the last 6 months worth of Sundays getting one episode per season. And this is not Dragon Ball Kai. This is episode 42, The Saiyans land on Earth. Y'all are spoiled, you Gen Xers. But to see this consequence live out in an animation style, which for the longest time, America would just delegate to the genre for kids. It wasn't until Beauty and the Beast challenged the Oscar awards and the American Academy of Film for Best Film that the Academy Awards kicked animation into its own category genre, thus proving that nothing animated could ever be as good or thoughtful or provoking or empathetic or elicit such feelings as a real Oscar award winning film, such as, I was trying to think of a terrible best film of the year winner, and too many came to my head at the moment. So
Well, I mean, but we also have that weird thing of like animated stuff. Oh, that's for kids, and I'm like, no, there's a whole different kind of genre.
So many of our parents were tricked into renting Akira from Blockbuster or Perfect Blue. This looks animated. This seems fun.
Princess Mononoke for 6-year-olds. Yeah, that's fine. But also not only that, right? But also like there's this whole thing because in Japan, and please don't take me this as being super accurate because I'm not really sure, but it seems like in Japan there wasn't really this is just for kids or this is for adults. It's like this is what we're releasing. Anybody can watch it, right? And I think that's why a lot of the storytelling for anime that is for kids, it's still very impactful. There's a lot of emotions, there's a lot of reality and trauma and stuff that comes with it. And then like we're seeing that now in Western movies and stuff with things like Encanto and like Turning Red and Coco and stuff. Like it's barely coming out.
I love that the new villain is not the villain. The villain is generational trauma. The denouement of all these old films, of these new films, Encanto, Turning Red, is shit's different, Grandma. We don't have to. Life is not a constant crisis trauma response. Things are okay now. Things can change. That's the best lesson that we've given, as opposed to the gay-coded sort of octopus drag queen lady Ursula is bad because she just is. But that generational inherited trauma and pushing that away, that's the bad behavior.
You know what I've started to realize though now? Because now there's a lot of books and like even movies that are coming out telling the side of the story of the villains. Yes. And I'm like, it's our generation that grew up loving these villains and be like, you know what? We need a story to explain why they were evil or where they were like, pushed to be evil, because it never really got addressed. It was just this very black and white kind of thing. Like, they're just evil because look at like they're dark, they're wearing dark colors, that like lime orange.
And that's so important in therapy too, is to be able to hold the fact that every villain is the protagonist in their own story. It's not good guy, bad guy in real life, but it is pro and antagonist. And sometimes, especially dealing with trauma-informed treatments, good people make bad choices, or good people have to make struggling, difficult decisions given like some of their biopsychosocial stressors.
So the other thing that I was going to ask, but we're already talking about it, is like, why would it be helpful for us to actually watch anime for the good of our mental health?
I love that question. I mean, so going along with this point of nuance and story, right? I mean, in Shakespeare's time, like up until he wrote Richard III, which was centered on a villain, understanding his machinations, a lot of stories with villains would just be like, he's bad because he's bad. And so it's like we're rediscovering this truth of nuance of maybe we don't glorify the villain, maybe we look at some factors that go along with their origin story and composition so that we can understand how to not go that route. And so I think that's a good jumping off point with anime of what is your capacity of ambiguity tolerance as a human being, right? Do you see everyone, do you split, which is that one of those classic primal defense mechanisms? You know, my friends, all good this week. I idolize them, I idealize them because they, you know, invited me to a movie, and then they're all bad the next week because they forgot something. They forgot to tell me hello this morning or something, or they were a little bit snappy. So I think it could be helpful to watch anime to see the shades of human behavior and emotions, and to understand, as in that earlier point that Karl brought up that I love, that there is an arc in life, right? We aren't Tom and Jerry, and thankfully so. It's not 300 episodes of an anvil dropping and then we don't learn anything and go into it the next time in life. Hopefully we're not repeating that same cycle every quote episode or day of our life. In anime, it does move toward some sort of development and growth. And the kind of negative sounding point is with characters like Goku, there's always a more powerful villain, no matter how strong he gets. Now that could sound kind of negative, like Sisyphus pushing up the boulder in classic literature. But if you flip it and say, well, there's always room to grow, and it doesn't mean you're doing something bad if there are continued hardships. I think that's an extremely valuable lesson for us to impart to clients.
Oh yeah, I mean, even if we want to talk about the moral black and whites and grays, something that I say in the Naruto trauma panel is how important magical girl as a genre is in what it is passively teaching people who watch it, both male and female fans. Sailor Moon does not blow up and kill the monster. Sailor Moon purifies someone having an emotional crisis.
Right.
It's the monster of it's monster of the week, yes, but the monster is always someone who is being crushed by these expectations of society. They overreact to start hurting people recklessly. And Sailor Moon, whatever the crystal dance is, whatever the stock footage animation is, it is always healing. It is recovery. It is stating you are not a bad person. You are a person having a hard moment. I see your pain. Take a deep breath and fall down. And it ends with that big cathartic, almost orgasmic shout out, I'm done. I'm exhausted. They fall down.
Right.
Yeah, to pick it back up, Karl, we even see this too with Demon Slayer, which does a really great job of where you kind of have this traditional villain and then you start finding out like, oh my gosh, it's like trauma. Like it's like someone just got consumed by grief. I remember what really impacted me was Dragon Ball Z, and so was Sailor Moon at the time as well. Dragon Ball Z, I remember hating Vegeta, I hated Piccolo, and then those two became two of my favorite characters when they did kind of like their anti-hero arcs. Whereas now, like, you know, Vegeta is kind of like almost like Grandpa Vegeta. He's like the most kind-hearted person that you could ever think of, but just a hard exterior because of how he showed up to the world. And that was all of his defenses and how his trauma was just repeated.
He's the leader that leads from the front.
Yeah. So I think that with storytelling, that's the amazing thing, I think, too. And another question to answer with Elizabeth, I think it is beneficial. Storytelling can act like a distress tolerance for a lot of us, where we can be able not to like escape reality and it's like numbing out or like isolation. I think more of I can take a break from life, or if I'm in these shows, there's life lessons with it. And then you kind of watch it thinking like, okay, I'm like downloading, but then you're like, wow, like I'm kind of relating to this a little bit. And then this might have been the answer I was kind of searching for. Or maybe my therapist said this and hinted to it. I've done this before with clients where they're in that black and white thinking, and then I'm like challenging, I show them like a show, and I'm like, is this really black and white thinking, or is this like the gray, or is this the rainbow, and this is the
is it possible
pink,
for us to sit in between? Can we sit with that difficulty and indecision?
Right. So I think there's so much that manga and anime can do for us in terms of therapeutic approaches, and also as fans. I know that that's my go-to to kind of decompress, and then also be like, cool, I'm still having this fascination within psychology too.
Yeah, it's a specialization that can become a hobby, and that is how we build community. That is the whole reason to get into it, is to find someone else to talk about it. And it's so critical when a kid latches onto it. So the nonprofit out in Seattle, Game to Grow, which not only teaches I saw your eyes light up, Jeremy. Me too. That's not only teaching mental health specialists how to use tabletop role-playing games and board games to work into group therapy, because building and normalizing a group in therapy and one around a tabletop role-playing game, same practices. We just gave this panel at Gen Con in Indianapolis 2 weeks ago. Where was I going with that? Crud. I think I just self-promoted compulsively about that.
Well, I mean, one of the things too is that I love about like Game to Grow and anime in general is that when we use anime in therapy is that we're taking something that people already love and being like, hey, look, it's not much different than what we're talking about. Like, I'm not sitting like across from someone and saying, hey, complex word, like jargonish
Everything
thing,
is
and I'm like,
transference.
yeah, and like this is also just really great for my own like ADHD brain, because words are not something that I remember a lot of the times, but I'm like, but I can tell you in story. You know that one thing that happened in like this one anime? Yeah, same thing. That's what I'm talking about. And like that's a lot easier for me to like communicate. Nowadays we're seeing that a lot with like, oh, I can show you a meme and that's how I feel today, right? Like I get a lot of that from like or even my own sort of like generation, where like if there's like no words for us to express, I can just say, hey, you know how this character felt when this other character said this one thing? That's kind of what I'm feeling right now. And then we find characters to like identify with, right? Which is one of the big things. If we don't have anyone in our like IRL sort of like community that we can identify to, if we end up identifying with like Goku or Gohan or like Gojo or whoever it is from anime, then we have someone where we're like, oh, at least we're not alone. Like I identify with this character. And then you meet other characters, other people who also identify with their characters when you go to like cons and stuff. And then that's how you start sort of like building that community, because we all need a community to just geek out with and talk about all our favorite things. Just part of what I don't like about the geek culture sometimes is that what we were talking about earlier, where there's these like, well, but that's not really anime, or like they didn't follow the manga as they should have, right? There's always this but. And then I'm like, okay, listen.
Which is another great point and contention of transference as well, because as long as there has been something to love, there has been someone trying to protect others from loving it the way that they do. And so don't ever get offended if you've got a client that says, I'm clearly the biggest and only Dragon Ball Z fan. Well, spoiler alert, Spanky, the anime ended in 1992 in Japan. The manga is so much older than your parents and grandparents. You're not the only person to love it. But those open up such great dialogues of coexisting and allowing other people into a space and allowing for a difference of opinions. We're challenging a lot about the dangers of splitting in black and white thinking, because that is our job cognitively as therapists as well. It's great to not only have, as you were saying, Elizabeth, but just concrete examples that people can point to. In fact, I don't know if we want to open up this conversation, Jeremy and Brent, if you're either One Piece fans as well. There are so many people that discover later.
No spoilers though, because
it's One Piece. You don't spoil it. Good pirates, other guys, they're gonna punch each other.
Canceled, please.
that is the plot of One Piece. There's no surprise. It is the same arc, and it's beautiful. Yeah. I am never going to say no to a good slice of pizza. I'm still happy that it's always pizza. But there are a lot of people later in life that discover of either having ADHD traits or being somewhere on the autism spectrum because of a lack of subtle communication, which anime does very much give. There is always a deadpan character whose dialogue just sounds like tapping on Morse code. But the loud, expressive stuff, you cannot deny what Monkey D. Luffy is feeling or thinking, because he either yells it directly or physicalizes it. And for a kid struggling with this, to be able to point to a panel and say this, that is so critical in being able to share that expression with parents, families, and friends later on. You cannot look at some of the most expressive anime and manga example out there and not know what the character is processing and feeling. And even if it's more ambiguous, that's a great lesson in and of itself too. The
Right.
those expressive aesthetics, they help in building a bridge of communication.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would say also there's a lot of talk now about men and animes for all genders. Definitely not saying it's just a boys phenomenon. But I was brushing up on Genesis Evangelion the other day to talk on that possibly. And my thought is like watching Shinji's journey without specific spoilers, from being very passive and wanting others to solve problems and just being a real spectator in life to being more resilient. It's done so beautifully that I think anime can really show those guideposts of adolescence and how to interact with others, especially if you suffer from crippling shyness or things like that, other things that get in the way. That it's just such an invaluable narrative tool for people to resonate and look at and say, well, this character overcame this, and they are realistically anxious, and their personality is at that nascent, very young state, and not where they want to be, even for that young age. So, and let's see how this journey progresses. And with anime, there's often so many human development and growth elements, and it isn't like a deus ex machina. Something doesn't come in, which is a hilarious term to use with like giant mecha anime, but there's so much interpersonal growth that happens that can happen in others' lives. If you don't have a giant robot, like it happens through talking with the characters and not just skipping and oh, they're better now, they recovered because they have a giant robot. Like, no, this is stuff that we can implement.
Yeah, it's not only that. I want to piggyback on what you said too, Jeremy, about like the super shy character. There are archetypes of there are archetypes of people, archetypes of either needs or embarrassment. Embarrassment and social shaming are a much bigger part of Japanese culture than it is of Americans, which is very individual oriented, and Japan is much much more communal, collective oriented, and that goes into the characters that we have. For a shy American, where it's always me first, to be able to see themselves reflected in a character, that is so critical and helpful for them to develop a language of their internal thought processes and their internal feelings. And I want to thank Brent for monopolizing the conversation entirely. And anything that you wanted to add or get to this?
No, you're good. You're good. I'm always in deep thought with certain things. I will make a disclaimer. I have not seen One Piece. It's actually on one of my to-go lists and stuff.
Wait until the new animation is what I hear. My brother's forcing me to read the manga, so we started together. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit difficulty when I have little ones running around, 2 little ones.
No. This will last you until they're like adults, so you'll be okay.
I've heard. I don't know if I have that commitment yet. Well, we'll see. So relating to that, with who do I want to bring up as a good example? I related a lot to Ash within Pokemon. I remember growing up and then being very insecure with my voice. I've always been kind of extreme introverted in my personality and just socially awkward, and later on having late diagnosis of ADHD and the little spectrum aspects of autism here and there, right? Ash I related to because he was such a prone thinker. At the same time, too, you could see the qualities of anxiety kick up with him. And then you have Misty, who's like so animated. And I always would think, be like, oh my gosh, I'm always one who's attracting like all these like people that are like hijacking my nervous system. And then you just have like this like very stirred, stoic kind of Brock. And it's so awesome to see, these archetypes. Yet at the same time, like the archetypes get like crushed. And I remember too, if I throw it a little bit within Sailor Moon, I remember my parents were annoyed as hell by the Sailor Moon series. I remember especially my parents just being like, what are you watching? Especially with things being animated. But when you look at Sailor Moon, right, she is so much in her head with everything. Right, you can see the insecurity, you can see the anxiety.
She's an straight F student. She has no skills, and yet the world puts this responsibility of saving the world on her.
Yes, and later on too, Deku's one of my favorite characters too from My Hero Academia. Deku is the same way too. I relate so much. I didn't think I would until I was like, okay, here's the traditional character of the hero. Deku is just very fascinating, where he's just constantly like in his book, and he shows that
He's just a
artistic side,
nerd.
and he's just a nerd. And I also think he's neurodivergent on top of that, just like how he processes things. You're always just seeing how he thinks, and I think that normalized it for me, and I normalized it with clients and patients. Like, you're not the only one who has these monologues in your head, and really, I can use this with therapeutic types of people. I'm like, tell me what your caption box is, right? What's your external one, and then let's talk about your internal, caption box that happened. And clients are like, wait, you do that too? And I'm like, yes, I do. Actually, I have multiple ones that are clashing at the same time. So I love that aspect of incorporating within mental health and just normalizing it. And what Elizabeth said so greatly, we're seeing that now with that diversity shifting all across different nations. And I just think it's an amazing thing in the sense of community. And I would use the trauma language. It's really important to co-regulate, right? This co-management, or if I go a little bit further, co-navigating. We need a sense of community. Some of my best relationships have been people I've never met in person, other than FaceTime and whatnot, or Discord, because I didn't have those. And then I think back, like to my generation of being, old and elder millennial at this point, of being like, I wish I had that. I wish I had that sense of community, because I was always felt very awkward. I felt very odd. I felt like I never connected because I was the nerd or X, Y, and Z. Whereas now we see the beauty of these younger generations. Well, that's a cool thing. Like, to see people walk around with proudly and like owning it. I'm like, what? I used to get chastised by this.
Because every series, every hobbies can get together, and they already have a shared interest in common language. Two people pass each other wearing Naruto hoodies and t-shirts. You're in the know. You're in the know. We know. Sakura or Hinata, Rock Lee. Like, yeah, there you go.
You're a safe person. Good. Let's have a conversation.
Right.
And I think this is also sort of like a time where we can see all of the other things, or I guess like you were saying, like our inner monologues, how they sort of like come or become our outer monologues. Because a lot of the times, well, not a lot of times, hopefully not a lot of the times, people are like, oh, well, you don't agree with me that this anime is like the worst and like nobody should watch it, or it's not as good as Dragon Ball Z, which is a big thing. Then it's like, okay, listen, I don't have the same level of attachment to it. I prefer different genres, right? And that's perfectly okay for me to be like, nah, I just don't vibe with it, right? And like I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about anime, and one of the things that they said, it was that Jujutsu Kaisen is really good, but it's only for a specific type of audience. It's very dark, and not a lot of people can relate to that sometimes. And then, but then you have things like Demon Slayer, and Demon Slayer is still kind of dark, but it's so much more relatable, especially for older generations. Let's say if, in Japan specifically, because it brings out a lot of those like very Japanese sort of like cultural things, right? That people can be like, oh yes, I grew up like learning this or doing this, and then that's sort of like the connection that they have now with the younger generations. I hear a lot of people, especially in Japan, they are big fans of JoJo, and like anyone, like as soon as they say, I really like JoJo, then it's instant connection, right? And that's what I love doing in therapy, because then I can just have something in my background, or or a toy out there, and then they're like, oh, this. Oh, it's a Pokemon. I'm holding a Pokemon. Pokemon, and I'm like, what do you mean I know Pokemon? I love Pokemon.
They don't feel as alone or alienated.
Yes, and they're like, yeah, it's a safe. It automatically becomes a safe space. And we're gonna take a tiny break to see if Jeremy can come back.
I just lost power. That's okay. We'll see how this goes. I'm on a hot spot, so.
Oh, okay.
That's always fun.
Sorry about that. Yeah,
thunderstorm
here.
You could really and I too, from California, can really relate to that. Yeah.
We were talking Demon Slayer a moment ago, And I wanted to relate something as therapists. I've got convention-based a nerd therapist in California that literally did a panel on mindfulness breathing techniques as introduced in Demon Slayer. When you get to the Infinity Train and Rengoku places his finger, take a deep breath, get yourself under control right now. I almost punched the screen. It was like seeing the end of Inside Out 2, and the fact that anxiety is the villain, kind of, but only because she starts with good intentions. I'm just going to play the last 10 minutes of Inside Out 2 for the rest of my career and never talk to anyone again. But the fact that Demon Slayer focuses so much on breathing and regulating yourself, that is critical in mental health, because who does not do that is Zenitsu. Zenitsu simply overstimulates, accesses his own, creates his own panic attack, and leans into it, and is completely useless until he passes out and crosses that anxiety threshold. There's such a great trilogy. There's such a great triad of characters to reflect on people, and we even talk about the gray areas. I have really loved, and someone pointed this out, that both Deku and Tanjiro, so this is My Hero Academia and Demon Slayer, are both Pisces. There's a push now since the 2020s and late 2010s for protagonists to be kind and have a moment of, demons started as people. They are hurt and they're in a difficult situation that they don't know any better of. Deku sees villains as people that society failed. And what if there were a society that helped them out? Oh no, socialism. What are we supposed to do when we help people other than ourselves? Oh, other people drive on roads that I drive on too? That seems interesting. People live in houses that aren't mine, and they should have running water and healthcare too. What a fascinating conundrum. Tell me more, anime fan.
Well, this is going to be so dark, but I love that you brought that up, because one of the things that I think I was in class and we had a special guest come in to do a lecture, and we were talking about family and trauma, and we had someone whose father survived one of the nuclear bombs in Japan, and she wrote a book about it. And one of the quotes that I will never forget is like, these two it was father and son. They were like, they had burns all over the body. They couldn't actually stand up, so they had to crawl in order, like, I believe they went to the nearest temple in order to be able to get assistance. But once they got there, they were told, no, you can't go through the main gate, you have to go through the back. And then they were like, dude, we can't even stand up. And then so the son started getting very, very upset, and then the dad told him, don't be afraid. You see demons now because we're living in a hell. And that just, like, I would just never forget that. And that's kind of like essentially what happened in Demon Slayer, right? Like, those people became demons because they were living in this hell. And that's such a great way for us to sort of like try to understand how not to take things personally, because a lot of the times we, out of the kindness of our heart, we're trying to help people, and then we get knocked out, or our own friends push us away from the inner circle or whatever it may be. And I'm like, a lot of the times, I would say even 80% of the time, it's not really anything to do with us. They are going through something and they don't understand it themselves, and it just kind of comes out as this
because trauma is
like demon, a really mean,
and trauma
thing
is
to do,
fundamentally, it is an internal inability to process what happens externally. Trauma happens to the individual. Healing comes from the community when the individual reaches out. There are so many intros and outros and animes and critical moments, and I'm gonna go to I think Digimon season 3. Devimon reaching through, Kari grabbed my hand. I don't think it's Kari, but like, he kills her Digimon Leomon, and he's reaching so hard, pull out of here. And she has a whole arc of, I would rather feel nothing than this pain, until she wakes up and realizes, I hate feeling this pain, but it is better than feeling nothing. It is the first step to forgiving myself for what I felt and forgiving you externally, which is interesting because this goes back to Studio Ghibli, which I'm amazed hasn't come up in the conversation yet. But Studio Ghibli's first theatrical release was a double ticket. Totoro was the palate cleanser after Grave of the Fireflies, which is about a brother and sister surviving
Oh.
after the bombing of Hiroshima. And
Mhm.
you know, it has the line that kills you of the brother fills his sister's candy tin with just rocks that he finds, just so she puts something in her mouth and in her stomach, and she chews it and says, oh, this candy's bad. And it just goes harder and harder. But the fact that a medium that was relegated to a genre of children so wonderfully and thoroughly illustrates, you get the pathos, you get the pain of that. And I think because some Japanese directors are willing to lean into it, and yes, anime should be and has always been criticized for some cases, depending on the director, depending on the studio, and depending on how the U.S. distributor did not label or watch ahead of time, gratuitous violence. There can be topless adult nudity. There can be graphic personal and sexual and physical violence. That's why we have rating systems over here in the States. That's why Japan is trying to adapt it as well. Kids sections are very clearly relegated away from adult sections. You can see this in any bookstore. If you go to visit Japan, you will find this on almost any Japanese-based website that you go to. They know their audience, and they know it doesn't help them to scare away their audience with accidentally slipping something dangerous or gratuitous or sexual into when it's not for a specific genre. And you know, I think we would have these arguments in the 90s of there were a lot of unnecessarily ingested, even the original Dragon Ball series. Panty shots and a lot of Master Roshi's jokes are clear boundary-breaking sexual assaults against every female character in the Dragon Ball series, and it was always played off as laughs. But you know, here in the States, we also collectively told ourselves Michael Jackson was a joke. We knew very clearly what was happening there. So this leads the conversation into a basis of like that loss of innocence or something geared toward children versus geared toward adults. And a lot of our big processing can be told really well through some of the older arcs. We're still seeing in Demon Slayer and My Hero, at some point, a really good series is going to have a dark embrace arc or a corruption arc. You'll see this in Inuyasha. This was a big thing in Naruto with his trauma response as a power, the Kyuubi, the nine-tailed fox. This thing, my anger, validates me, and it will make me stronger and faster for longer. And also, Berserk, you won't know who's friend or who's foe. That is an anger response, because anger is a rush.
Right.
Anger is a power. And if you listen to it, it will always validate and ask for more. It just doesn't know how to regulate and leave it and take itself away. Corruption arcs are just as important as redemption arcs and revalidating those societal norms.
Well, and there's too this idea of now, especially nowadays, I think we see it a lot more often, where we're like, oh, we have to shelter our kids, or kids can know about all this violence going on. And then I'm like, well, they go to school and everyone's going to be talking about it, because like I had I used to work at this daycare. No, I wasn't working. I was volunteering at a daycare center when I was in undergrad, and I would just hear the teachers talk, where there was two professors that worked at the school I was going to at the university, and they didn't allow their child to watch princess movies. And then I'm like, okay, that's your parenting choice, but you also kind of have to be aware that now your child is going to be isolated, because everyone else knows about all of the princesses except your child, right? So like this is just kind of has to be like must prepare the child as well. And there's things like, you know, harder things you would talk about, like racism and violence, and like, is the police safe or not, right? Like all of these things we have to address with children, because they are aware of it, they just don't really understand it, right? And we have to do it in a way where they understand. And I think that's why one of the reasons why I really like anime, because they don't for the most part, they don't really shy away from emotion. Here in the US, it's like start crying, immediately pan out to something, right? And in Japanese, it's like, no, it's this whole inner monologue of like how much it's hurting, and it goes on for like sometimes like several
They
episodes.
physicalize, they show characters having breakdowns, they show characters doubting themselves, having moments of weakness,
Mm-hmm.
and they're always beautiful moments. Even if you get deep enough into My Hero Academia, Deku's not the only one crying. Everyone at some point reaches this cognitive dissonance and realizes this vulnerability of, I am not enough. I tried so hard
Right.
and I still failed. I want to do better next time. It is so critical to let people know it is fine and a part of growing up to understand your limitations and your
Right.
vulnerabilities and your triggers. I'm always thrilled when, especially a shonen protagonist, manly men, when they're able to cry and express something.
It's amazing.
I also wanted to shout out, because you mentioned JoJo's earlier. JoJo's is, I used to equate it on stage as a trauma, because it's something you can't understand in the moment. It can only be passed on to other people, and it ends up in severe back pain and facial contortions anyway. But any book of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure makes no sense until book 6, when it intros with the 6
Right.
words that make anything make sense. This story takes place in Florida. Okay, got it. Nothing can surprise me anymore. This all makes sense.
But you know, I think one of the things that I absolutely love about anime too is that, and this is something that I started to notice first with Ghibli stuff, is that they're they have these shots where like there is no purpose to this shot other than to show you how beautiful the scenery is, or like what
Right.
the protagonist is seeing, and that gives you a moment, like a tiny little moment of like, okay, I can breathe from like the intense emotions that just happened, right? Or there's like a joke afterwards. Like there is just this, it's almost in a way it's showing you like, okay, lots of emotions can be overwhelming, but then, you know, you can look at the scenery and see how beautiful it is, or like look how these houses are, you know, like, and you can sort of like let that go a little bit. And yeah, and then it's just a lot easier for me to say, hey, like, you know how they have this one thing in anime or whatever, you should try doing that in real life. See what happens,
Yeah.
right? Or like with
Yeah.
the breathing work that we were talking about earlier, be like, it's a lot easier to be kids are like, oh, we're gonna sit here doing, you know, water breathing, fire breathing, or like, no, sorry,
Let's
it's
try
the different breathing
mindfulness breathing.
forms.
Let's try box breathing. Regulate yourself. I'll sit down now.
Yeah,
I'll
but
box
that's
breathe.
boring though. But if you were to say, let's do like the first form of breathing, then kids are gonna be, oh, like in Demon Slayer, yeah, I can do that, right? It's like you immediately get their attention, and this works with adults too. I love working with kids, which I do, but I also work with teens and adults, and like really, it gets all of our attentions, right? And it's just a lot easier for be like, oh yeah, you know, you're watching an episode and be like, oh yeah, that's right, I have to do mindfulness breathing, right? You're watching an episode and there's like a beautiful shot of a scenery, you're like, okay, yeah, I kind of have to go outside and touch grass now, right? Like it's these
Right.
beautiful reminders that we get throughout weird relationships or weird superpowers or these like totally unrealistic things that are happening in anime. Like it's still grounded in some sort of like reality, right? Like we, even though like earlier you guys were talking about Gundam and like robots and then weird superpowers and stuff, like moving moons and whatnot, like sure, that's like super cool, but also their problem is usually something that we can all relate to, right? Like it has nothing to do with whatever superpower or weird thing is happening in the anime.
Yeah, I
Right.
was gonna bring it up too. I remember I was late to the game with Full Metal Alchemist, and I just heard it for years and years and years. And I remember I think at the time something, no, it was 2020 actually. That shows you how long it took me to get into that. And I was furrowed at the time as a therapist, and I remember spending I think it was like a week. I watched everything, and I remember the emotional impact that had, to the point where I had my wife has had association of nerdiness from me over the years, not to the extent of watching the things, but just having space to listen to things. I remember at one point during finally through the third arcs and stuff like that, with some of the characters passing away and stuff like that, or the heroism of certain characters. And I remember like bawling my eyes, and I was like, what's going on? And I was like, you just give me a moment. I'm a Pisces. I'm fully connected.
Was this original anime or Brotherhood, or did you do both?
I did both.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. At the same time, which was very, very interesting. And then I leaned in a little bit more to another one that was more, I think, more in time with the story, with more emotional impacts.
Because Full Metal Alchemist is all about the challenges and the moral grays of adulthood, and the world is not fair. That is the central gripe and the argument of, do we have enough will as humans for a fair world? Because it is not built fairly at all.
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah. In order for change, you have to give up a standard. Equivalent exchange, and then at the end of the first series, they take some liberties because the manga hadn't finished yet, but it's the whole argument of the world is not fair, and alchemy is this edge and this power that we have, and Brotherhood is this massive, beautiful political just drama of the world. Brotherhood's just so excellent, but it will cut you deep. Do not get attached to people. They go through it, and you go through it with them.
Yeah, they should have warned all of us water signs before watching that.
But that's the other aspect too, where it gives us a space to like feel those emotions, because a lot of the times in our daily life we don't really have a space to grieve. And also it becomes, because I did another panel where we talk about grief, and we, of course we're all geeky providers, so we were all like, listen, sometimes we have grief over a character who dies. Yes, we know they're fictional, but still we were like so attached, like that attachment we had, that connection we have, that was real. So yes, I need time to like process the death of my favorite character.
The aesthetics are nothing. The emotions are always real. And the same thing happens with TT RPG players. Character deaths have hit me as hard as family members, because I put so much of other people and myself into these characters.
Okay, now I have a question for you, which I will allow you guys to think about it for a little bit. But what is the one anime you will encourage everyone to watch? I will say
This is a social worker, because we person in environment perspective, and so there is no such thing as a one-shot all, and that's why the answer is Cowboy Bebop, because it's a love letter to all things Americana from the 60s through the 80s. It is about people in their late 20s trying to survive in a galactic recession. It is about the road not taken, and it's a beautiful aesthetic in the meantime. So it's a lovely, welcoming gate anime. There are also films that are easier to absorb. Not everyone wants to binge watch, even though it is worth noting. Anime fans were the original pirators and binge watchers. We marathon viewed on burnt CDRs. I went through 200 episodes of Inuyasha over the course of a month in my college library. Okay, like you had 4 episodes per disc. You had a giant stack of discs, and you traded those at Otakon for anything. Room, time with a girl, whatever it took. We were the original binge watchers and marathon viewers. My answer, because I'm 1984, is Cowboy Bebop.
I don't have an
that's
answer.
a tough one. Yeah.
I'm making you guys answer because I don't have one.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think that I love Death Note so much because of the interplay with the character, and we've got a character who starts out with best intention. I don't want to go with that. I want to say that I would probably go with Neon Genesis Evangelion. I mean, there's been so many commentaries on it. I mean, but there's such a journey there, and there's the archetypes of like the stoic character, insecure character, headstrong characters. right? With the leads, there's so much packed into it, and to even just the 26 episodes of the initial series, that if I'm looking at something that's encompassing like themes of psychological development, but also is a really true anime, I would have to go with that one just off the top of my head right now.
Nothing hits the way that Ava hits, because never before was there an anime whose entire antithesis, yes, God is sending biological angels to attack us and our only hope is man versus robots, but it's the anime where the punchline is, the entire arc is, it is scary to connect with other people, and CBT, it ends with, maybe I could try to be happy on rainy days too. I guess
Yeah, right.
I could
Exactly.
try. Not I'm
Right.
going to. I have pulled the sword
Can
and I am
try.
king. It's I
Right.
try. Maybe
It's
I'll
kind of a
fail.
beginning. Right. Right.
Like a Neon Genesis.
Right. Exactly. That's right.
You crack me up, Carl. I love you, man. Love the animation. I'm torn. I wouldn't go back to most of the classics and stuff. I'm a superhero nerd. That's why I love My Hero Academia so much. I think it helped if you're a huge fan and kind of getting burnt out of Marvel and DC. It really made me connect with my inner child again on the superhero genre in another way possible, being like, oh my gosh, like this is why I fell in love with superheroes and villains. And not only that, but the arcs that came up with showcasing the villains. And then I would say it's a tie with Demon Slayer, because I just think there's so much within grief and loss conversations. And then this complexity of acute trauma, and then with the PTSD for some of the characters, and then the complex chronic trauma. And there's just a beautiful aspect with it in this moment of like healing these characters. And probably, as Carl may note, with both of them being Pisces, which I didn't click at the time, I was like, well, now that makes a lot of sense since I'm a Pisces. Probably that, as well as me being able to personally relate to those two main characters, that it's okay to be empathetic,
empathetic character,
and having these abilities where, you know, Deku always believes in the possibility. I'm kind of like that to a fault too, with a lot of clients, especially in the acute level of care. I like working with clients that other clinicians that they're inside. Why even bother? Like, they've been to treatment 30 times and stuff like that. I'm like, throw them in my trauma group. Let's do some play Vela theory. Let's see if what I can do, and just showing space with them. I love that aspect of not giving up on people, and then having a different perspective. And when you can truly show up empathetically and truly hold a safe and space that is socially engaging connectedness with somebody, you can change their life around. And it's a beautiful thing, which I'm sure all of us has experienced as, you know, as therapists, is when that change happens. And then the client goes, oh no, like it was all you. And I'm like, no, it's not. Like, I just presented that space and you allowed yourself. And they're like, I didn't think anyone was going to like help me. And it's like, no, you were helpable. I just had to get you to see that you're in your own version of hell from DBT, Dr. Marshall Lanahan. I just need to give you some tool sets or encourage you with this embodied wisdom to pull yourself out. So
I think I'm gonna go in a very similar route and talk about trauma, or like recommend something that is also very trauma heavy, which is Fruit Basket. That is more of a girl one, but I love that one because it shows you all the different ways that children can be traumatized, and it's not just for the children. It shows us like, oh, I was traumatized as a child, right? I experienced these horrible things, and now they're affecting me, right? It has like so
societal
many
enforced sexual and generational trauma disguised as a rom-com.
Yes. And it makes my nerdy little heart that it's just a happy ending, because I love those. Like, I need to have some hope for the future so I can continue trying, right? And I think that does like a really good job, because again, it goes back to like, hey, you need to process, you need to feel, you need to sort of like let go and like find something else that's like more for you. And even the main character, because at the beginning the main character is the one that's sort of like being there for everyone else, and at the end they're like, no, 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 you are also experiencing trauma, you also need help. So that's also hitting the, the the healer in us, because a lot of the times, as an older child, or as a parent, or a sibling, or whatever it might be, or like just our personality, we love helping people, but we often forget to help ourselves, to take care of ourselves. So it's a great reminder of, don't forget about you.
So anime is an incredible medium to get into for people to realize and learn they have a martyr complex.
Right.
If I am not good enough in this moment, so many times the characters, especially in a shonen, they start the corruption arc because they need more power. They don't have enough time. They have to protect everyone else, and we will see this in traumatized communities. We'll see this with immigrants. We will see this with second generation. We'll see this time and time again with firstborn children of, as long as I take it, I can take it, as long as you leave them alone. It's the Goku. How dare you hurt my friends? Again and again. There is a point where even that person needs, effectively our job is to build up the internal Uncle Iroh to have to turn to. Most excellent. I love what you just said there, Liz. Very, very insightful. Thank you.
Now, let's move on to who is the best anime character. Go. This is supposed to be something for you guys to consider. Shout out your answer. The first one that came to mind, that's the one.
I've already talked about it.
Nicholas D. Wolfwood from Trigun.
Deku.
Ooh.
Yeah. I like Trigun.
Oh man.
That's a good one too. That's a classic. I like him.
I can't remember his name, and I feel so bad now.
You've forgotten him.
The lead from Vinland Saga. He is the best character.
Okay.
The best.
Oh, haven't gotten into Vinland yet. Very good, Liz.
I love Vegeta.
Have to. Okay, wait, hold on. Let's sidetrack a little bit and talk about Vinland Saga just a tiny bit. I started watching it because I started a podcast, and then they said that in the second season they talked about how the guy's main thing was to say that he had no enemies, and I was like, what? And that prompted my journey, and I'm like, it's such a, if you don't want to watch it because the animation is trying something new, and it's kind of like more of a miss than a hit. The story is great. It's just the animation itself. But the last year at Comic-Con San Diego, I got to see some of the artwork for like the actual manga, and it's beautiful. Like the way that they show, like it's just one panel, like what it means to like have all these people that you wrong sort of like dragging you back from like moving forward. It's just amazing. You guys all need to watch it. It is great. And it's such a, again, it starts with like one of your favorite things, Carol. Like he just goes into this, like, I need power to defend, or like I need to avenge my father. And then it moves to like, I will kill you, to no, somebody else stole my chance, to I have no enemies. And it's beautiful.
Oh yeah. There's actually a line that I love in the religion Sikhism. I see no strangers. If you go through life knowing that you will never encounter a stranger, that leaves them open to be anything else. Family, friend, teacher, mentor. I see no strangers.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Excellent.
So talking about go ahead.
I was gonna say I have dinner plans in about 20 minutes. Do any of
Okay.
us have any upcoming projects or ways to get in touch with us that we wanted to kick off?
Do you guys? No. Okay. So wait, hold on. Last question, and then we'll go to
I
do the
do.
outros. And then I'll do the outro for the panel. I mean for the panel. Yes, for the panel. So I'm a big fan of quotes because ADHD brain likes names and words like sometimes don't come to me. So I steal words from other things that I absolutely love. And then, so what is the one quote that you saw in either a manga or an anime that is still very impactful for you today?
I guess I could learn to be happy on rainy days. Yeah, Shinji Ikari.
Mm-hmm.
I have mine. I just made sure I got the wording for it.
I like-
My Hero Academia, whether you win or lose, looking back and learning from your experience is part of life. I love that quote.
Mine would be push through the pain, giving up hurts more from, you guessed it, Vegeta from Dragon Ball. A little DBT element there too, right?
Oh.
Like if you're in hell, then the only thing to do
Yes.
is get out.
Hmm.
Yeah. Great quotes. All right. So this is still, even though I tried to make it shorter, it's still a very lengthy panel. So thank you out there for making it all the way to the end. Let us know what your favorite quote is in the comments, so everybody can also have a moment of like inspiration for today or whenever it is that they watch this panel. If you have any questions for this amazing panel, let us know. I'm always open to doing a part 2 because we have a lot of things that we still haven't talked about. So we can address some of those questions in the next panel potentially. And also, we talked a little bit about community. We now have a Discord. So if anybody is interested in joining our Discord for Psychology for Geeks, you're more than welcome to do so. And we are also doing live streams on Twitch every now and then, which also gives you a chance to be a part of our Psychology for Geeks community. And now I'm going to pass it over to Jeremy. You said you had something you wanted to sort of like promote or talk about. Go ahead.
Sure. So my Instagram and Substack are both Fox Psych, FOXPSYCH. I love to post therapeutic content on there. And my TikTok is Talk Psych, TOKPSYCH. So I'm looking to probably do some more pop culture stuff on there, but things about men's mental health, making trauma treatment really understandable, and what's good trauma treatment, what's not, what's good therapy, what to look out for, that kind of stuff I'm passionate about.
Awesome. Thank you. Brent, Carl, do you guys have, in case anybody is wanting to connect with you, either for your actual like pay jobs or for your like side jobs, being a geek and a nerd and wanting to do some collaborations, anywhere they can find you or reach you at?
Yeah, I'll go. You can find me at the Geek Therapist at a lot of different of the social media platforms. If you're curious with having conversations with me, those are the best kind of channels to reach me at. Professionally speaking, if you are looking for a geek therapist and trauma specialist, you can find me at Brent Lyles at Psychology Today. And that's kind of where you can find me at.
Awesome. Carl?
Rock and roll. I still have all of the old stuff up there on the Uncle Yo YouTube. I am about 3 months into, and you can watch me struggle to learn Instagram in real time at Uncle Yo Anime Therapist. I'm really looking forward to more convention appearances and speaking. In fact, at the end of October, I will be in New Brunswick, New Jersey, presenting at DerbyCon. It's very exciting to come back to Jersey, my old stomping grounds. I am also submitting programming for PAX Unplugged in Philadelphia this coming December. And you can always almost find me in Lancaster, Pennsylvania in March at ZenkaiCon, the first ever convention I ever performed at. Now 15, 17 years in, it is always like coming home because it's across the street from an Amish farmer's market. Maple, bacon, donuts keep me back year after year. But Uncle Yo Anime Therapist on Instagram, as well as just YouTube Uncle Yo, you'll be surprised with what you find too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And all of the information, in case you're like me and kind of miss it, is going to be at the description of this video. So worry not if you couldn't catch that. And also, again, thank you so much, everyone here, for participating in this panel, taking a few hours of your lovely, lovely weekend. And I know it's harder because you guys are all mental health providers, and I know you really need a break. So thank you for taking a break from your break to be here. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find us on pretty much any social media at psych4 geeks. And I don't know what panel is going to be, or like what interview, what video is going to come after this, because I don't plan that far ahead. So just make sure you subscribe to our socials or our YouTube, and that's how you're going to know what's next for us. Also check out our website, because we're doing a lot of live events. I get IRL events in my local community, so check that out. And don't forget to reframe and re-enchant your life, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye.